The Ultra Dolphin is back, yet again with Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine. This game was first released in the winter of 1999 for the PC, and it was met with strong reception critically, but critical opinion aside, the game was still a major mess overall, with weak controls and glitches galore. 1 year later in 2000, this game was ported over to the Nintendo 64, and it stands as one of the nicest looking games for the console to date. Factor 5, the developer behind Rogue Squadron, was responsible for the port, and it shows as there is some real quality sound and level design. They improved upon some problems plaguing the PC version, like frame rate and lighting. Now, despite being an Indiana Jones game, this port for the N64 gained little support from LucasArts in terms of marketing and project funding, which led to a low production run as well as release in specific markets. Factor 5 only had the budget for a team of 8 people to work on the Nintendo 64 version, and it is rumored halfway through the development cycle, the team was cut down to only 2 men in order to meet the deadline for another game, Star Wars Battle for Naboo, so that it could ship for the Christmas season. Very few advertisements existed for this game, and anybody interested in playing the next Indiana Jones video game most likely already played the PC version. Consumer interest dwindled, and planned release for Australia and Europe was cancelled. So the game was only released in North America, and could only be obtained through the now defunct Blockbuster retail chain, or off of the LucasArts website. There are a limited amount of copies available today, and most used cards demand a high price. It is questionable how many copies actually exist of this game, as figures range from as low as 10,000 up to a respectable 50,000. Now, any non-retail release console game gains a lot of attention from collectors, although to be honest, most of the time they're not very good. Like the infamous Sculptor's Cut or Super Bowling 64 for this console. Nobody's ever going to break out and play the campaign mode Super Bowling 64 unless they have to justify the 2 kidneys they sold in order to buy it. So as far as rarity versus playability, I personally would rank Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine with the silver medal right behind the Japanese exclusive Bang.io. There are very few retro games that justify an insane market price tag. Seeing how the N64 Indiana Jones is better than the PC version, if you want to experience a 90s platforming indie, then I believe this is money well spent. If you're not too big of a fan though, stick around as I discuss some possible turnoffs. I'll be looking at the major complaints against this title, as well as go over some of its best highlights. First off, the story. It's convoluted biblical religion-based power stuff, so prepare to open your mind. Indiana Jones competes against the Soviet Union to locate the ruins of the Tower of Babel. Legend has it that King Nebuchadnezzar II was inspired by Babylonian god Marduk to build a machine that would allow him to cross over into a dimension of supreme beings. The Soviet commies intend to locate the parts of the ancient engine and fuse them together, so that they may harness the power of interdimensionary travel and somehow convince the god Marduk to help the Reds conquer the world. Okay, not a very solid plan, commies. What if the god Marduk doesn't like you? The absolute craziest thing about this storyline is that it was an alternative. The original plot to this game was basically Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. George Lucas shot down the idea because he wanted to use it for a 4th film. So aliens were out, and the writing staff at LucasArts chose a Babylonian god instead. Now, while both plots are incredibly ridiculous, I would rather have Indiana Jones confront Babylonian gods than aliens. On a side note, what a terrible movie, but of course you already know that pain. Okay, let's head over to the controls. Surprisingly, for a jump puzzle platforming structure, the N64 controller handles very well. Dr. Jones is responsive in movement, as the control scheme feels like a hybrid between Ocarina of Time and the original Tomb Raider. The button layout is pretty straightforward, and looking at the N64 controller, you'll know that's an accomplishment. The buttons on the right side of the control pad you can assign to different items. This makes quick triggers a breeze for scenarios when you need to put the shotgun away and hurtle over a puddle of lava. You can lock onto enemies with the Z button, and it works fairly well. Even if you don't get an exact lock on, chances are you'll still hit a target. Now, moving on to the flaws. The whip is kinda a cool feature, but not really. You can only use it to get past obstacles where the game wants you to, and besides that, all it's good for is disarming enemies, which you may think is useful, but the enemies that do carry weapons generally attack you in groups. So while you're disarming one, you'll get flanked by the other, then killed. So unfortunately, put the whip away. Just like in the real world, it's for show only. Many who've played Infernal Machine protest the game as too frustrating due to poor hit detection and bouts of random freezing. Although with some patience, Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine can be a really fun playthrough. To clear one of the complaints up, yes, the hit detection is poor, and you will probably encounter at least 5 minor glitches in every level. Successfully completing long-range jumps and intricate evasive maneuvers does make the gameplay very frustrating at times. The best way to describe this, Indiana Jones handles well, except the environment around him does not. Landing jumps, his feet will miss the edge of a cliff and you'll fall to your death. Same with climbing up ledges. It's a real crapshoot, and about 1/3 of the time Indy won't catch onto a ledge he's grabbing even when it seems you're perfectly lined up to it. If you can deal with a 30% failure rate when making first try jumps in the fashion of, say, the first Tomb Raider, then this is the game for you. This lack of hit detection with the environment is the biggest flaw of the gameplay experience, although with trial and error, you'll learn the exact spots to make jumps, and further on it becomes less of a problem. Now the second major flaw is the freezing. In my playthrough of the campaign, the game froze 4 times, and this is a programming issue, not any sort of overheating. Don't be confused or distraught if the game freezes. The first time this happened to me, I thought something broke. Nope, it's just the game. Certain actions in just the right location will trigger the game to go haywire and overclock the N64. Luckily, the game has a progressive save system, and the N64 doesn't have load times, so if this occurs, you hit the reset and resume your game not far off from where it froze. This may be a deal breaker for most people, but honestly I didn't think it was that bad. The gameplay is enjoyable and it's a long adventure with 16 levels and also a bonus level that ties in with the famous Golden Idol scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. The levels feel in the realm of the Indiana Jones universe, and if you're a fan of the series you'll find it interesting, and finding out where the plot goes will motivate you to look past the glitches. It's satisfying when you scale around large obstacles and figure out strange puzzles. The strongest aspects of the game are collecting sacred objects along with killing commies and endangered animals. By the way, in retro video game logic, animals always want to murder you. It doesn't matter what size they are either. The jungle cats in this game actually think they have a chance. Well, they'll get a bullet to the face. Speaking of which, the weapons are of a delightful variety. Indiana Jones has never packed this much heat. Sure, the option to use hand-to-hand combat is there, however it's useless and you'll just be blasting everything in sight. Along your adventure you'll be able to skip the classic fisticuffs and kill with an arsenal of 3 pistols, an SMG, a shotgun, a rifle, a bazooka, a machete, and lastly a good dose of grenades. I'll show them in use more in the upcoming highlights, where I'll look at some of my favorite parts in the game and some features I really enjoy. Let's dig deeper into these levels and stop screwing around with the tutorial stage. We're better than this. Okay, let's check out a lava level. Lava levels in games are some of my favorite because they usually defy all logic. Normally, any humanoid creature would burn into a smoldering crisp if they got anywhere near molten magma, but this is a video game so that doesn't matter. Indiana Jones can hover inches away from lava without even the slightest first-degree burn, but beware, if he touches the surface, he'll explode into an impressive display of fireworks. It looks great, and with that, this level shows off the expansion pack very well. The draw distance is far for the N64, and textures are varied and match the elements they belong to. The expansion pack accessory isn't needed to play the game, however don't bother playing without it. The blur and lag is intolerable when using the standard jumper pack. Anyway, I want to give you some tips that dramatically increase your ability to stay alive when platforming. Most of you watching have played Super Mario 64, where Mario jumps immediately up when you tap the A button. It's not the case here. For Indiana Jones, this is a little tricky. There are 2 elements that come into play, movement and trigger time. In order to jump forward, Indy has to first be moving. There are 3 running speeds when tilting the joystick forward, and jumping during one of these speeds affects the distance of your jump. In a traditional sense, when you want to complete a short jump, one would usually press forward and the jump button together in one quick action. Where this game differs is that Indy has a brief animation before he jumps, like he's winding up. So if you jump and move forward in the same action at, say, like the edge of a cliff, most likely you'll find yourself sliding right off. To counter this, with the joystick, find resistance where you lock yourself into one of the 3 speeds. Then jump always where your feet meet the edge of a platform. This may seem like a straightforward tip, although it avoids a ton of frustration as some traditional gamers may find it difficult to adjust. Another tip during gameplay is save after major obstacles like puzzles or traps. Going back to what I mentioned earlier about a progressive save system, I mean the game automatically saves your position every time you enter a new room within a level, sometimes even multiple places throughout one room. There are tons of checkpoints, so if you die the game allows you to quick restart at the last one in the room. Additionally, on the menu screen the game has a manual save feature, which due to the few freezes you'll encounter across the campaign, I would manually save every 20 minutes or so. My last tip is utilizing the Z button heavily. The Z instantly maneuvers the camera behind Indy and also lines them up correctly to trigger the right jumps and actions in-game. What's also nice is that when holding the Z button, you're unable to fall off ledges. This makes seeing down over pratfalls easy and gives you the option to hang down from other ledges, which you might use to soften fall damage, shimmy across platforms, or just to get a better view of what's below you. Now let's keep talking about the redeeming aspects of this game. So when you manage to get the camera lodged behind a wall, the wall will disappear rather than obstruct your view. This was a major flaw that plagued many early 3D platformers, and I'm glad they've corrected it here. It makes moving in and out of tight corridors manageable. Next up, there's a feature called the trading post, which gives you an incentive to collect as many treasures as possible, because at the end of most levels, you get a menu screen which allows you to use the money from these treasures to buy ammo, health, and other items. So this collectathon actually aids you across the course of the campaign, rather than just to add to some high score that nobody's going to see. There are a total of 10 treasures within each level, and in addition to earning cash for the trading post, you'll also earn points which goes toward a stockpile called the Indy Quotient. There are a total of 2,000 points you're able to obtain within the game that comes from solving puzzles and earning artifacts, and the tracking's pretty much just there to measure how well you're doing within the campaign. There's also a hint system which helps you out with puzzles and where you should be going, and if you choose to activate the hint, you're deducted points off of the Indy Quotient. If you finish the campaign with at least 1,600 points, you get the Raiders of the Lost Ark bonus level. However, even if you suck, don't worry, there's a cheat to play anyway, so it's all good. If for any reason you're bored with a level or you're about to lose your mind on a specific obstacle, there's a passcode screen which with the code FORGEOFF will unlock all 17 areas. A majority of N64 games never had a feature like this, which if you were to get stuck as a kid, you never get to play the rest of the game. If you had rented one for the weekend, you were plain screwed. With a level select and full unlock, this allows you to play what you want to play, as well as go back to levels where you missed certain treasures. Other add-ins include a sound test feature which allows you to hear all the soundtrack bits, and also an artwork gallery to see the concept designs. Lastly, I'd like to praise the game for its voice acting. Doug Lee does the voice of Indy returning from the last game, Fate of Atlantis, and while he's not quite Harrison Ford, he does an excellent job mimicking one-liners and reciting all that archaeological nonsense. The sound design as a whole complements the events in the game as you'd expect, and what makes this a highly polished game despite its few freezes and faults. Another highlight is the Jeep level, and this is about 5 times better than I thought it was going to be. Let me explain. In level 3 you have to navigate around a river system with a raft, and the controls for the raft are clunky beyond understanding. It handles in the water like a hunk of driftwood. To top that off, there are dagger rocks everywhere which puncture the raft on the slightest impact. And although the game gives you a second chance to live while the raft is deflating, it's not even worth the extra time to save yourself. You'll still die just trying to find a spot to escape off the river. The raft was easily the worst segment of the gameplay for me, and I wasn't excited to see that I'd be handling a Jeep. Now level 8 is where the Jeep comes in, and it's hella fun. I mean, it doesn't handle anything like a vehicle should, but it goes like 80 miles per hour off-road, and it's incapable of rolling over. You're glued to the seat and the Jeep bounces off walls like a pinball. Vehicular manslaughter is a blast in this game. That definitely makes it a gem in my book. But making it in my book isn't that hard, so I digress. In conclusion, there's a lot of hate towards this game, and besides the occasional crash, I believe the hate stems from the difficulty. It's a challenging game to say the least, and this really isn't a game for kids to pick up and play through. This will test the patience of the most veteran platform gamers. It will make you reevaluate your whole outlook on gaming. Well, okay, probably not, but it's an uphill struggle to play through, and the payoff of beating it feels like an accomplishment, not a waste. So to recap, overall Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine may not land on the top 10 for the Nintendo 64, but it's a high caliber platforming adventure, so if you're into the N64 and you've never given this one a chance, I recommend picking it up. Even more so if Indiana Jones falls as one of your favorite movie franchises. The cart may be expensive, but it's not like it belongs in a museum. Play it on an emulator or even the PC version if you're interested. You'll get to kill tons of commies, and at least it's better than watching Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That's the last thing I'm going to say. Thanks for watching this video. Like, subscribe, do all that jazz. Thanks. This has been a presentation by the Ultra Dolphin. Hope you all had a great time, because I know I sure did. Good luck on all your collections, and game on.